Brian Killenberger from the TDC will go through some points with us.
Okay.
I'm not on there yet.
All righty. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Brian Kellenberger, Director of Beach Operations. My department is contained within the TDC, and we're in charge of beach maintenance and beach code enforcement. So our meeting today is to discuss beach management plan, and so that would encompass all the things we do, maintenance and code enforcement. First, I'd like to start off with a few statistics in our handout here. Josh, if you'll flip to the other one.
The long one?
No, ma'am,
No.
the one that has the charts on it.
This has charts on it.
Okay.
Yeah, the long one. Yeah.
First chart is our trash collection by month. As you know, we have about 600 trash collection stations on the beach. This is our monthly rate of bags. We average the trucks that come in, bags per truck. We keep track of this in different ways as to show our efforts on trash collection. The next page is a year-over-year from FY15 to FY16. As you can see, we're down slightly in garbage collection this year. Don't have any real reason why that is. Some of our numbers, as far as people coming here, amount they spent, we're down slightly, but from the previous year, so that could be a part of it. Another thing we do is the leave no trace removal. We now do that with our beach maintenance crews as opposed to beach code enforcement crews. We collect these items nightly in accordance with the ordinance, a little over 9,000 items this year. These range from umbrellas to chairs to mainly tents, other traditional beach gear, occasional boat, stuff like that. The next page is our beach code enforcement statistics. This year we had approximately 3,500 contacts. Contact is where one of our officers encounters a person on the beach to either check compliance with an activity they're doing or to mete out some enforcement action, which could be a verbal warning, a written warning, or a citation. Of those 3,500 contacts, we issued about 904 verbal warnings, 100 written warnings, and 68 citations. Keep in mind this is through the month of August and does not contain September's stats because we haven't compiled those yet. But we'll be on track for what we did last year. One thing that is different is our number of contacts. We reclassified what we call a contact. Last year it was anybody and everybody that we talked to. This year it was only people that we talked to about enforcement activity. So with our 3 officers, and then we got 2 new officers at the end of the year, we I believe are making a difference on the beach. If you notice that of the breakdown of written, verbal, and citations to total contacts, that means the rest of them were more than likely in compliance. And so as we see stuff that looks like it may not be in compliance on the beach, a lot of times they are. The normal stuff we deal with is dogs, glass, the leave no trace, and of course vendor related issues. There's several different ways vendors can be out of compliance, and we have that broke down in our activity summary report that we'll look at next. So the next big spreadsheet you have is what I call the summary of activity report, and what we do is we compile it by category, and then we have what we call the status of that category, and that status is either in compliance, verbal warning, written warning, or citation, and then the total number of contacts. And that's how each category is broke down through this spreadsheet. You can look out to the right. That is our annual total for each one of those statuses associated with a category. The top one is total contacts. There's your 3471 number, approximately 3,500 contacts. First couple of yellow lines are call, meetings, glass containers, horses, dogs on the beach. Like I say, these are all of the sections in Chapter 22, Municipal Code, Waterways and Beaches that we enforce. So with that being said, a few other stats. Permits we issued last year for vendor permits, 167 total permits for 59 different vendors. Compared to last year, we had 140,
Brian, would you slow down a minute?
Yes, ma'am.
167 total vendors,
yes, permits.
permits.
And that's the mix of specific place permits and delivery vendor permits.
Okay.
And of that 167 permits, that included 59 vendors. A lot of vendors have more than one permit.
Okay.
Compared to last year, we issued 142 permits for 60 vendors. So we had approximately the same amount of vendors. Some of the permits, we noticed the increase in specific place permits, which is indication that people are securing these private property contracts for exclusive use of that portion of the beach. So of the types of complaints we received this year, majority were ghost sets, early setups, storage at the toe of the dunes. That could be vendor or public storage at the toe of the dune. As we know, last year there was an interpretation of the ordinance that allowed people to store their equipment at the toe of the dune if it's going to be used the next day. And so we saw an increase in that, which is something that needs to be addressed this year, I believe. Other items we saw on there, very few of were the vendor 50% rule. As you know, we established vendor zones. Vendors comply with that on a regular basis. Occasionally, we would have some infractions. Typically, they're associated with a vendor's new employee that didn't quite understand, and/or a vendee would move equipment out of the vendor zone after it was placed in that vendor zone, simply because they wanted to be on a different section of the beach. One item that we did have a lot of calls on late was, of course, that change we made that created Section 2255, which is the prohibition of signs, posts, and ropes on the beach. We spent a lot of time on that over the last couple of months. So all in all, we had the usual issues on the beach that we've had over the last couple of years, typically caused by congestion. Congestion is lack of beach now. As you know, our beaches are critically eroded. We lost a lot of horizontal distance on the east end of the beach starting in May, and that decreases area for people to set up in. We don't have exact number of chairs and umbrellas that are rented, but it felt like there were more of those on the beach this year, so that creates more congestion. But all in all, it was a pretty regular year, and so as the purpose of this meeting, we would like to take comments and questions from the public on what they feel was good or bad or we can do better. Pending any questions you have about information I presented right now.
Okay, before, I was remiss when we first started. If you would please mute your cell phones, please, or anything that makes a noise, that we would appreciate that. Commissioners?
Out of the 60 vendors, do we have any way of knowing where they actually live? Are they Walton County residents that are in business? Or?
Yes, ma'am. We have a comprehensive list that includes their business address, what they vend, where they vend, of course, all their contact info, phone numbers, email addresses, and all that. So we can do a query on the list to do it by zip code, and that'll identify how many we have within Walton County zip codes or out of Walton County zip codes.
Can you give us any idea? I mean,
I don't have that right in front of me. I mean, it would take me, we have, like I say, 167 permits. If you'll give me a day, I'll sort it, and we'll find out the actual
if there are
number.
only 59 vendors, then...
Yes, ma'am. We have it done by permit number, so there's 167
Okay.
permits.
Okay.
The list I have in front of me is an abbreviated list. Looking down through it, I see Miramar, mostly Panama City Beach once, Fort Walton Beach, same person, so there's one. I'd say out of all of them, there's probably less than 5% from, maybe 10%. There's some Destins. We'd have to see what that actual address is, as if it's Destin, Walton County, or Destin, Okaloosa County.
Okay.
We'll get that information to you tomorrow.
All right, good, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
Brian, you mentioned that there was some issues dealing with early setups.
Yes,
Do
sir.
you know approximately how many they were? And also, were they part of the Turtle Watch during that phase? That part of the receiving the message over their phone is it's okay, it's been cleared, it's time you can go ahead and move out, set up?
Okay, so the question is, how many were there and how many were valid, complaints?
Yes.
I don't have the breakdown of that mix in front of me, but typically that's who we get the complaints from. It's once again, our officers have to be on site. They have to observe the violation firsthand. And so it's problematic with the officers we have being everywhere on the beach. Once we would get a complaint in a certain area, we would then focus on that area. We'd also make contact with the vendor to let them know that we had received a complaint and that we expect the behavior to change.
With the majority of the vendors, or all of the vendors, are they part of that program, that
Yes, sir.
notification? They all,
Yes, sir. It's a very easy program. You sign up for it, the text comes right to your phone.
and all of them have a permit to vent?
Pardon me?
All of them have signed up
Yeah.
to
Yes, sir.
vent? Okay, thank you.
Wasn't that a requirement? Didn't we require them to do that?
It's a part of the requirement of the permit application,
That's what I thought.
that you have received the information and you will abide by the rules. And one of the rules is they sign up for the text program.
Are you aware of any issue between Turtle Watch folks and vendors of any type of altercations or threats or whatever?
No, sir. We didn't have any made to my knowledge of a outright threat. I noticed it through some of the complaints. They were about Turtle Watch, and then there were some notes of vendor taking picture of Turtle Walker or vice versa. But we did not have any outright physical confrontations.
Did you write violations for early setups of tourists or just people? Or was these just?
Well, part of our enforcement action is we have to give proper notice. And typically when we encounter a visitor, 7-day visitor, we'll catch them on a Monday or a Tuesday, or if we do catch them, we'll give them the notice they can't do it. And that usually changes their behavior, or we don't encounter them the rest of that week. Might be that we're not in that exact location again the next day or the day after, but typically they get the message. As you know, what drives that is the race for the water's edge in the morning. 7-day visitor figures it out on Sunday that he has to beat the vendor down there if he's going to get a front row seat, or that's the perception. That's not really the case up and down the beaches. At our regional beach accesses, half of it is a restricted vendor zone. In other words, the vendor is restricted to that zone. The general public has 100% use of that beach. But because of that, we don't write many citations to visitors for the early setup, or in that case, they'd actually be in violation of the obstructions clause, or the obstructions section.
Ryan, is there a setback because here's what people are complaining about.
Yes,
They're
ma'am.
walking down the beach and they can't even walk down the beach because of this.
Yes, ma'am.
And
There is-
that's the most complaints I've gotten is, and you can see, they go as far as the eye can see.
Yes, ma'am. There is in the section of 2260, says that the vendor must set up a reasonable distance from the water's edge.
I think we need to change that word reasonable because that's to anybody's, that could mean anything.
Yes, ma'am, it does. It obviously is interpreted differently.
And I know that the surrounding counties are really getting on it because Panama City set up, I think, 30 feet. And I mean, and we're the county that everybody's saying, we don't want to be like Walton County, we want to be like Panama City Beach.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're getting the reputation that Panama City Beach used to have because when you get reasonable to whom?
Right, I agree. We have a hard time with that one.
So that, in my opinion, needs to be a certain distance from the water's edge to give people a chance to walk down the beach.
Yes, ma'am. We have, started compiling, of course, we received a lot of complaints, you did.
Yeah.
We've had 2 postseason vending meetings, and through all of that compilation efforts, there is some definitive verbiage that we'll bring before you as part of the recommendations for revisions to the ordinance.
Good. 'Cause
That'll be
when
one of them.
Because what I'm hearing is, this is just an example. What I'm hearing from the public and the tourists is, if y'all don't do something about the vendors, the beach experience is ruined, and we're not coming back. And I can go through these, and people are saying, please help us. Vendor zones and the hell of the last 3 weeks. Dear commissioners, we can no longer get down to the beach because of the vendors. The vendors are ruining the visitor experience, and they ought to be able to set up on public lands without paying a higher fee. $500 is not very much to make money off of public land. So the public is all over Facebook, all over 30A.com, whatever. Just on and on. And so from what I'm hearing is that people are saying the vendors are the problem, one of the big problems, and that that is causing severe, it's causing people to not come back, and it's causing people who live here to not even be able to get on the beach. So the ghost chair setups that people are using.
Yes, ma'am.
I thought those were supposed to go away. They haven't gone away. People just go out and set up lines and lines of chairs to block people off from the beach. In my opinion, county needs to take over the vending situation, and the vendors need to be run by the county, and the county needs to get a portion of each chair's take for the day. This is what a lot of other places do, and what we're doing is we're selling our beach cheap, and we're running people off. It doesn't make any sense at all. We have got to do something about this problem. We've got to do it, because it has gotten so bad out there that for the first time I've heard people say, we're not coming back. It's just awful.
Yes, ma'am. I received a lot of those same complaints. We have some ideas. We've looked around at different counties of what they do and how they do it, and so those will be part of the recommendations that we bring back for consideration.
Brian, as I see the issue, there's 2 sets of vendors. One that contracts with the condos, and they have, let's just say they have 100 units. They go out and put 100 chairs out, whether if they're rented or not. They go in 3 rows. And then you have another set of vendors that, they don't do that in 3 rows. Now, I'm not sure if they're having ghost sets. I know we've asked them to monitor themselves, patrol themselves as far as those. But I'm thinking some people are confused in the contract vendors that have the right, because they're contracted with a condo, to do 3 rows, and as opposed to the other vendors that don't so much abuse the system.
Yes, ma'am. Investigating some of the complaints we got about ghost sets, we came to the realization that some of the complaints were not founded because they were a specific place vendor that has a contract with a HOA or resort community controlled beach, and their restrictions are based on the contract they have with the owner. So in that case, a ghost set is not really a ghost set. Now, on the delivery vendors, the problem we have with ghost sets, while we are having a hard time minimizing or mitigating them, is because the section of the code that we use to stop that is there's no speculative vending on the beach, no active vending. So a delivery vendor's permit allows them to bring equipment to the beach. It doesn't allow them to come down, set it up, and wait for a person to come by and rent it. And so since most of the delivery vendors now do a weekly, and a lot of them do annual contracts associated with rental property that is north of 30A or first, second tier, it's not Gulfront property. And so because they have a weekly rental or an annual rental, they meet the definition of the code as in is not a speculative set. Now, there is an understanding that their rentee, may not use that equipment every day for various reasons, and more than likely will not be using it the whole day, whereas they set it up at 7 and tear it down at 5. And so that's where we have a lot of the ghost set complaints. So we're coming up with some solutions to that. As before, we've brought forth what we call a beach vendor management plan for the public beaches. There's a couple of variations of that: straight land lease, a portion, sharing of revenue, straight RFP for services, where the landowner, we're going to pay you to do this vending, and we're going to take all the revenue in. But we'll bring all those forth, and we'll explain the pros and cons for each one, and let the commissioners decide on how they think is the best way to manage these issues. Like I say, I think ghost sets could be somewhat minimized, mitigated by that, because we'll set a set of rules and regulations of how a vendor would work on a beach that's managed by us. But right now, there is some areas in the code that make it hard for us to enforce that particular issue.
It's almost like you have to check each complaint out. I know the one time I got to go to the beach this summer, I asked the guys to put chairs out for me, and I went to church and didn't get down there till about 1 o'clock, and he had a lady come down and say, "You've had this out all day, this is a ghost set, this is a ghost set." And it wasn't that it was a ghost set, it was just that I didn't, decided to go to church before I went out there. So you have to check out each complaint to make sure it's legitimate, and, that we're being fair with everybody.
Brian, especially too, since we're buying beachfront parcels now, we're buying more public beach. And I think this is going to be critical, because I think if we can get a handle on this and restrict it to a certain number under contract with the county.
Yes, ma'am.
And get revenue off of it, then I think that now's the time to do it, because of all the beachfront that we're now buying.
Yes, ma'am. We have a lot of public beach. Some of it's associated with our regional beach accesses, where we are the upland property owner, and we have a lot that is seaward of private property. We also need to think about paragraph D8 with the upland property written authorization for vending. That causes a lot of movement of the vendor zones that are on public beaches, seaward of private property.
I'll remind you, though, that was a promise made to the people in western Walton County when the renourishment was done, that they would have the right to say no to vending.
Yes, ma'am.
You can't take it away from one section of the beach and leave it for the other.
Right.
So that's something I don't see going away.
Okay.
Brian,
I don't see that going away. Do you, Mark?
I think I feel confident we would have a challenge, because as I understand it, it was
Right.
it was part of the beach renourishment on that end of the beach. Yes, ma'am, and it got codified in the beach activities ordinance.
So we're bound by what past commissioners
Well,
do? I mean, you know
no,
that for a
you-
fact, or you
No,
need
can
some time
always-
to look into it?
No, you can always change an ordinance, but you would get a challenge, would be my guess. I mean, obviously.
Right.
Did you want to speak, Mr.? Yeah, go ahead. Okay. I have a question, but you go first.
okay. Brian, we just purchased 2 parcels on the beach,
Yes, sir.
and the complaints, for lack of a better word, that I have received at my office from the citizens, north end of the county, or even the visitors, is that they're having to compete with the vendors that are out there. And then there's not a whole lot of room left for them to do their own setups. I would offer to the board for consideration, at least on these 2 and maybe any additional ones we may purchase in the near future, that they be vendor-free. It'd be strictly for anybody that's got their kids and an umbrella and whatever, and there would be no vending on that. It would just be for John Doe that wants to come down and set up. I think that gives them a,
Mark, did you do that on one property and not the other?
Yes, ma'am. And I'm saying that off the top of my head, but yes, ma'am. The property you own and control, you can make rules for by parcel.
that's what I thought. And I would think that would be something that would be afforded to others than the ones that may be renting a condo or whatever down there. Okay, thank you.
Well, I've gotten the same emails probably as Commissioner Meadows, and the 30-foot road. Can we apply that to the contract vendors? And we ask that they be set up no more than 30 feet, or because it's like Sandestin or whatever, we can't require them to not be right in the water?
I'm going to have to defer that question to Mark. You know, we have a couple of different property relationships to the water's edge in Walton County. We have
I was
some,
just using Sandestin as
Yeah.
a word, not necessarily.
like well, in Sandestin's friend, you know, on the western end of the beach, they have an erosion control line that's approximately 60 feet from the water's edge. So that's actually their southern boundary of their property. The specific place permit gives them to exclusively vend on that private property. And then on the eastern end of the beach, we have some property that goes to the main high water line, and some that goes to the toe of the dune, some to the top of the dune. So there's different relationships, and so I'd have to defer to the legal department on how we could set rules and regulations on private property.
We could, I mean, right now, we require removal, for instance, of all material after dark. And we could certainly have regulations as it relates to vendors that they can only set up, even on private property, a certain number of feet from the beach. There's nothing that I'm aware of that would prevent you from doing that.
Yeah.
Legally.
And then the practical application has to be considered as well. You know, the reason they sit so close to the water's edge is because they don't want people to come sit down in front of them. And so if you restrict a vendor, let's just say on a piece of property that's resort community controlled like Seaside, you tell them they can't set up within 30 feet of the water's edge, and they still allow other people to come that aren't guests of their community on that beach, and then they're allowed to set up in front of the paying customers, I think that's going to cause some grief. So all that stuff, I think that should be considered as we must, you know, work through these different ideas on how to change behavior on the beach.
Taxpayers would be paying customers too.
I know some counties that I visited have a locals-only beach. And it seems like so much of our people from the north end come down and they want to go to the beach and bring their kids, and they have a hard time finding parking. And, you know, this might be something we want to look at in the future, you know, just having a locals-only beach.
Yes, ma'am. That kind of goes hand in hand with Commissioner Chapman's idea of a vendor-free area. I guess you could call it the same thing.
If you're making money and you're using it as a commercial operation, and you have to set up 30 feet or whatever the rule is, if somebody comes and sits in front of you that's a tax-paying citizen,
Yes, ma'am.
or then
Oh, yeah.
that's the way
I think-
that's the way it
yeah.
is.
I think it's something we can easily do on our public beaches. I was referring
Yeah.
to the
But if
beaches
you-
that go to
The
the main high
private,
water
I think you
line.
could do it on the private beaches too, couldn't
But
you?
if you do the 30 feet and you say vendors, you have to be here, but, you know, locals or whomever, you can sit up here, well, then how would the people walk up and down the beach?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true, yeah.
And of course, the property we've purchased with TDC funds, we would have a difficulty,
yeah.
a great deal of
Have to be
difficulty
districts.
excluding tourists.
Well, didn't we
Well, maybe
talk,
we could.
I'm sorry, didn't we talk once about, like, when you rented your chair Sunday or whatever? Talking about the vendor putting on it, you know, rented by Cecilia Jones, so we know it's not a go setup, it has been rented?
They do, they put tags on them.
Yes, ma'am.
They do. It was just someone that just got irritated because that chair was there and there was nobody in it. She,
Yeah.
you know, she
Because,
waited.
you know, I mean, you know, as I've said, you know, my kids come to the beach because they're Yankees, so they come down and enjoy the beach. And, you know, they take the kids in the morning for a little while. They usually go back to the house for lunch, you know, get out of the heat, and then they go back in the afternoon, you know. Well, of course, they take their own stuff, but I can understand somebody not be sitting in that chair for 8 hours, you know.
Yes, ma'am.
But to have the name on it, say it's rented by Cecilia Jones, you know, for this week.
Well, what they used to do at Seaside was they would have a guy in a kiosk on the beach.
Yes, ma'am.
You came down and you said, I want 2 chairs. He went then and set them up.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
you either half a day or whole day. Half a day, he knew, half a day, he went out and removed that set. Or somebody else was coming for the other half a day, he put them in it. They used to never have ghost chairs because the chairs weren't set up unless you were there.
Right.
So what would be wrong with having a kiosk and having the chairs set up when the people come and rent them
At our public beaches.
at our public beaches?
Yes, ma'am. I think that's a good idea.
You know, and then if it's half a day, they know to move it. If they want to rent a chair and pay all day and and not sit there, then that's up to the person that pays the rent. But you've got somebody there who knows what's going on there, instead of just kind of mass chaos, which is what I'm hearing is going on out there. It's just people lining chairs up right at the water's edge and nobody using them.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's basically being done by some of the private property owners to keep people off of their private property.
I like that idea, but we're gonna, if we do that, we're gonna have a kiosk and them rent chairs, then we're gonna have to go, wouldn't we have to go to like a lottery or whatever where you bid on, let's say, Grayton Beach and whoever's.
Well, you could have an RFQ, you could request for or RFP or something, and you could do like you do road engineers. You hire 5 of them or 6 of them, and then, they're the vendors, and if they do not perform like the rules say, then you go on to the next. But now, we give 3 or 4 citations and 3 or 4 permits. Nobody's license has ever been pulled. None of them. And so, it gives you more control. We've got to get control back of our beaches. We have got to. This cannot go on. It has gotten really bad, and we have got to get control over the beaches.
Could I ask about, deviate for just a minute? I mean, I've heard about an ice cream truck going up and down the beach or in the water or whatever. Are we having other trouble with other vendors other than just beach chair vendors?
No, ma'am, the ice cream vendor was a somewhat isolated incident, and I believe
okay.
we were successful in court today. He challenged the citation and did not win, so I don't think we'll be seeing much more of him.
Was he in the water actually? Or?
He was skirting the edge of the water with a inflatable raft with wheels on it, and claimed that we didn't have jurisdiction, but the judge saw it differently.
Because I saw a sign coming, actually leaving here last night, beach bonfires and a number to rent bonfires.
Yes, ma'am.
We're turning our beach into basically a commercial venture. And I wait to see if we're challenged. I figure somebody's going to put a hot dog stand on the courthouse lawn out here, because how can we, if we let them use our beaches, how can they say they can't just set a hot dog stand on this property too? Yeah, that's what I was going to do. You were going to do that? Sorry. It's the beaches belong to Walton County. This building and that property out there belongs to Walton County.
Yes,
and if
ma'am.
we let people vend on the beaches without any regulations or rules and regulations, then how can you tell somebody, hey, you can't set up a hot dog stand out here in the parking lot?
Yeah, you're exactly right. We have one sentence in the ordinance that says no vending of food and beverage on the beach. And that's how we keep it, people from doing it. This fellow actually got I believe it was a vending without a permit, as well as vending food and beverage. So.
The city of Destin, I just read where they put a 6-month moratorium on people that were coming down to the harbor and vending all kinds of crafts to go out in the water, and collecting the money and then sending the craft out. And it was just getting so crowded. And one of the commissioners said it was a carnival atmosphere. So they put a 6-month moratorium on anything like that, vending on public property, until they could get a handle on it. And so that's something that's been done in our neighbor.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioners, do you have any other questions at this time? Brian?
Brian, when are you going to bring this back? I mean, when are you going to bring your proposal
We're going to take
back?
the information from this meeting, the information from the last 2 meetings we had, as well as our activity report, and we'll bring it to the TDC on October 4th, and it'll be come to the BCC shortly after that.
Okay.
Typically, we like to do all our business here in the South Part, so that would be October 11th.
Okay.
And I don't see why we couldn't have it before you're at that meeting for just, open for discussion.
Okay.
And of course, we'll
Thanks.
send out all the information a week in advance.
Great. Thank you.
It'll be very similar to what we had last year,
Okay, yeah.
narratives,
Right.
charts, statistics.
Options.
Yes, ma'am. And then options laid out and pros and cons of the options.
Thanks.
Do you have anything else, Brian?
No, ma'am?
Okay. I'll now open it up for public comment. I think, let me see a show of hands of who would like to speak so I can get some idea. Okay, not that many, okay. I'll start with the first row then, and I'll take it row by row.
Sarah, I think you got a sign-in log.
3 minutes. Did you do a sign-in log? I didn't think you did. But they didn't use one. Yeah. So we'll start, I'll go row by row.
Brian did do a sign.
Brian did? Okay.
I don't know how many of them want to speak.
Okay. Bob, you're already up there, so. Yeah. I'll do Bob.
I'd be happy to defer
Oh,
to
no,
whoever's
that's
already
fine, you're
signed
already
up.
up there. I'll do Bob, and then, Mr. Bagby, I'll get the front row, and then I'll do this, and then I'll open it back up, okay? Bob Brooks, okay?
Name, do you want names like we normally do?
Please, yes, because we need them for the record.
Bob Brook, B-R-O-O-K-E. I'd like to thank Mr. Kellenberger for providing us with the beach activity statistics. However, I'd like to warn you that the statistics can be very misleading. You might say, based on the numbers that showed up on the statistical chart, that we had very few violations of any of the codes, but that also might be because we didn't have people on the beach checking out what was going on very often. So I think the statistics may be interesting, but they're misleading and probably invalid for any conclusive kind of procedures or any kind of decisions you might make. I wouldn't base them on those statistics. I just have a list of things here. One, I agree 100% with Commissioner Meadows on the vendors setting up once the renters come to rent, not in advance. I've been going to the beach all my life, not here, but in places where they've been dealing with these kind of problems much longer than Walton County has. And in general, they have vendors on site on the beach, and when somebody wants to rent chairs, umbrellas, or something of that nature, or other kind of beach paraphernalia, you go to the vendor, you rent it, they give it to you, they set it up for you. When you rent, they don't set up a whole beachfront full of chairs and umbrellas before anybody's there. I think that would solve a lot of the problems and the disagreements that some of our visitors have with the vendor operations on the beach. Code enforcement personnel. I know we've added code enforcement personnel to the number that we had, although I think the number we had was woefully inadequate. I think it was something like 4 or 5 for the entire county, if I'm not mistaken. I'd like to know what criteria anybody used on deciding how many people we should have in terms of code enforcement on the beach. Has anybody looked at what the hours of coverage ought to be? What the time of the year ought to be? Is it seasonal? Is it on the weekends? Is it from 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening, 7 days a week? What's the priority of code enforcement on the beach in terms of budgeting for it, and how much would it cost? I think somebody needs to take a look from some systematic approach, not just saying we have 5, let's have 10. 10 is better. Maybe you say we've got 26 miles, or if you want to forget the state-owned beach property, let's just say 20 miles for the sake of argument. Do we need to have one code enforcement person on the beach during the operating hours for every mile of beach? That's just a criteria. I don't know what the criteria ought to be, but somebody ought to come up with a rationale for the numbers.
Well, I talked to Jeff McVeigh and I asked him, what do you think is reasonable for one code officer to cover? He said a half a mile. So you could have a code officer cover a half a mile, and that's how we came up with you would need a lot more
Exactly,
officers. But,
exactly.
But that's how we came up with, and we started with 10, just thinking that we would start rolling them out there. And you may need 20.
Well, by that number, you might need 40. And
Exactly.
that's if they worked every hour of every day, 7 days a week, or every hour of operating hours, 7 days a
Right.
week. You're going to need more than that if you're going to have to shift them from different times and different days.
Right, so it's a huge operation.
I think the only problem with that, we are seasonal, we have seasonal visitors, and let's say we hired, 20 in the summer, probably would be, wonderful. But yet, to keep them employed full-time, say some of those would have to be redirected in the fall and the winter to some other, because to me, you can't train these people and get them training and then only hire them part-time. So you're going to have to hire full-time workers, full-time employees if you want to keep them,
Well, I'd offer the same suggestion I made to the sheriff years ago. Was I grew up in Maryland. I went to Ocean City, Maryland during the summer. I went to the Jersey Shore. I went to Delaware Shore. They know how to manage seasonal crowds at the beaches. And they hire, in Ocean City, they used to hire hundreds of college students, as a matter of fact, as part-time security people on the boardwalk during the summertime. They didn't do it year-round. In fact, I think it'd be foolish to hire people year-round if you didn't have year-round work for them. I guess a couple other questions. I mean, I know I'm over time.
You're
but-
over time, yeah.
Okay, one other question too is,
Quick.
is what you're considering now your beach management plan with customary use or without customary use?
We're not talking about customary use here, no. We're
But beach
talking
management
just about-
depends on, I would think beach
Understand.
management is clearly dependent on where you
Understand.
stand in customary use.
But
And I'd like to suggest that before you do anything, you better resolve that issue.
that,
Thank you.
thank you, that may take a while. Mr. Bagby?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jim Bagby, B-A-G-B-Y. Real quickly, we would ask that you put the tents to the rear or not allow tents on the beach. One of the big problems, but put tents to the rear within 30 or 40 feet of the toe of the dune, because they become a problem. Open space near the water, somewhere between 20 and 30 feet from the water's edge, is free of everybody. If you want to put the vendors further back and put them, 50 feet back from the water's edge, so that there's that between 20 or 30 and 50 feet for individuals to set up, that's fine, but everybody should be off the water, because even if it's customary use or it's not customary use, people are allowed to traverse. I don't think anybody in this county would tell you that individuals are not allowed to traverse along the water's edge. So I would say 20 or 30 feet there. Nothing left overnight on the beach except the boxes that are permitted. Okay, because the problem is that the vendors, we've allowed the vendors to neatly stack up all their little chairs and all their little umbrellas. And if I'm coming down from Birmingham, Alabama, and I see stuff stacked up on the beach, I'm going to stack my stuff up on the beach. So nothing other than those permitted boxes should be allowed overnight on the beaches. No-go setups on public beach by delivery vendors. Okay, and I think y'all have talked about that, and the reason we're asking for that is the ghost setups, yes, they do create a problem. They even create problems in the resort communities, because the owners go down and they want to sit on the front row, and there's some renter that's got a chair on the front row because they ordered earlier or paid more or whatever. So no ghost setups on the public beach by delivery vendors. We ask that all vendors need to have a person on site as long as one set is set up. And that addresses the issue or solves the problem of, are we going to do an RFQ, are we going to do an RFP, or how are we, because then if I'm a vendor, I'm just going to concentrate in a couple of areas where I have people located. I'm not going to put one set here, go 3 miles, put another set. If I have to have a person physically there, then it's not a cost-effective business, if you understand what I mean. Maintain the rights of the upland property owner. I get very nervous. I would defer also to Mr. Davis, but a promise was made to people, and so if you take that away, take that promise away, what I'm afraid will happen is, well, we know we'll get challenged in court. I guarantee you the offers will be there before the ink is dry on your ordinance. And, I'm sorry.
I'll let you finish.
Okay. If they challenge that and they win, then all that public beach that exists from 4 Mile Village to the Okaloosa County line just became private. And that is, what are you going to get and what are you going to give up? And I would ask that you do a cost-benefit analysis, because you're going to give up a lot of public beach if you challenge and you lose. Now, whether or not you lose, I would defer to Mr. Smith. And then the last thing on the locals beach, that was the concept of Topsail, because none of the visitors know about Topsail, but the free parking all summer long, most of the locals are starting to figure that
They
out.
are. Thank you. Next, I'll use Valerie Lofton. Valerie? Are you here? Come up, you're next. Yeah, you signed in, you're next. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. What about Claire, Khan, do you want to speak? Okay, yes, ma'am.
It's Claire King, K-U-H-N.
Thank you.
I don't have to be sworn in or anything, do I?
No, ma'am.
Okay, my time's going, I gotta go. Okay, I like dogs, and I like to get my permit because I get a charm, and at the end of every August, I yank it off my dog and I put it in my jewelry box, because one day I'm gonna make me a really nice piece of jewelry out of all those beach charm permits I've gotten, because they're like, what, $60, and I'm not throwing them in the trash.
Are you talking about dog charms or?
No, the charms that they have to get to go on the beach, to get the permit. So I say this to say, I don't mind paying for my dogs to go on the beach. I follow the rules, but what makes me unhappy is when I go down to the beach and there are dogs running loose, not within the hours, without their nice little Walton County charm on. So unpermitted, off-leash dogs on the beach, running wild, leaving dog waste in their wake, make permitted, rule-abiding dog owners angry. And when law-abiding dog owners get angry, we call the TDC, and we leave not very nice text messages for the TDC. And then the TDC feels really bad, and they feel underappreciated. We don't want them to feel underappreciated, so we ask that they please enforce the dog rules so that we don't have to all feel bad about it. And the times when they are the worst are sunrise and sunset, and they seem to like Eastern Lake entrance a whole lot. So I would appreciate it if I'm going to have to pay the money for the dog permit, that rule would be enforced a little bit harder than what it is right now. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate that. Yeah. Eric Johnson, did you want to speak? Okay.
Hi, my name is Eric Johnson, Miramar Beach Service. I'm the owner of Miramar Beach Service.
Johnson?
Yes,
Johnson? Okay, thank you.
Concerning, you were talking about pushing us back 30 or even 60 feet from the water on the specific place contracts. I've worked my whole life, I'm 36 now, to own my own service. I have a specific place contract where I have 216 feet of beachfront. Not a big stretch, but I have the vending rights to that. You're talking about pushing me back 30 feet, like, that's gonna seriously affect my sales next year. Like, to the point I could go bankrupt. I mean, I think it's a serious thing you're considering, and I hope you consider all sides. That's all.
We certainly will. Thank you, sir. Scott, Linda, help me out. Corser? Corser. That was just about right.
You're close. So do I have to say my name again then?
Would you spell it for our clerk, please?
All right, C-O-R-S-A-R. I just wanted to make a comment. I've communicated with Ms. Meadows a few times. Since the last time we communicated, I've had 2 cancellations because of people not being able to set up on the beach. I have 2 rental properties on the same street. They sleep. If they're maxed out, I could put 30, maybe 40 people between the 2 houses. I don't know how much you're making on the beach chairs, but this is 30 and 40 people that are not coming back to Miramar Beach. This is just 2 people in the last year that have stated the same thing. It's going to get worse if these people keep harassing the people that go down to the beach. They come to my house, I got a deeded beach access, they go down, they're told they can't set up their tents there, they can't get too close to the water. They get fed up and they don't come back again. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Field Williams?
Sorry, I also thought it was a
Okay. Appreciate you signing. All right, now then I will take it row by row. The second row there. Yes, sir.
Dave Meadows, Meadows. Thank you guys very much for allowing us to speak tonight. I just have a couple little points I wanted to go over. Just some explanations, I think, from what we heard earlier tonight. A definition or difference between private and public vending. You've heard that most of us private vendors, we all have contracts. By the way, I am a vendor. I work for La Dolce Vita. And I've been doing beach vending for 30 years now in Walton County and in Okaloosa County. The private, we get contracts with the condo, and it's private property, and they all claim they own up to the water line. They give us specific instructions. That's their association rules and so forth, and we follow those to a letter in a contract that we have with them, detailed all the way down. Some of those properties are located next to to a public access that causes conflict. Because the public comes down, they don't have a place to sit, so they veer off onto the private property. Causes a problem. We have to enforce the private property rules by saying, hey guys, we don't allow you on our beach. So that's where we get a lot of that complaints. The pictures of the sets too close to the water and so forth. So public vending, it's different because we come down and it's basically the deliveries because we're not contracted at a public beach. So it's all deliveries. All my deliveries, and I've showed this to Brian Killenberg, I have a log sheet that we set up per area, tells you turtle zones, so we know what time to go out there and so forth. And then we do seasonals. These are the people that pay, rental companies that pay for their guests to have chairs whenever they're down. We only set them up whenever they're down. And then we store them at the toe of the dune in that area. So we try to communicate with all of our guests each week to find out when you're coming down to sit. If they say we're not going to be there Wednesday, I'm not setting chairs up on Wednesday because our guys are tired and they don't want to do it all the time. So we don't do ghost sets. Our sets are bought and paid for every single day that we set them up. And that's majority of the vendors that deliver on public lands. The setback, if you do a setback on private property, there's some areas, and you guys all know this, that 30 feet sometimes is all that they have whenever storm surges come up. And that picture right there, somebody will complain, they'll walk at 9 o'clock and the water's up to the chairs, but they walk back by at 12 o'clock and there's 20 feet of space in between. If you leave that space in setback, I agree with Mr. Bagby, please enforce it with everybody because the moment that the vendor is told to go back, that entire open area will fill up with all metal chairs, umbrellas, and whatever else they can put there. And we don't have the right to enforce anything as long as they're in front of us. I just ask you to consider those things, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else on that road? All right, the road behind it. Anybody? Anybody on this side of the room at all? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. If you'd state your name for the record and spell your last name.
My name is Tiffany Hughes, Hughes. And I am a Gulfront property owner. I just moved here in August. And from my vantage point, things look a lot different than the pictures that people like to paint about it. As far as code enforcement goes, I've watched people urinating on my neighbor's dunes multiple times, going up, walking on the dunes to take pictures, and having no general care about private property and the dunes. The dunes are protected. Nobody's telling them no. I went out yesterday on my paddleboard and I came back and there was a group of kids. Well, I don't know kids, but they were all drinking beer out of glass bottles and they had poles set up for, with bottles to aim their frisbees at and partying. Nobody told them no. They had music blasting. Nobody said anything. Code enforcement wasn't there. Your only problem on the beach is not just the vendors. It's the people too. And when you said that there was 3,500 people that got spoken to, 942 warnings and 68 citations. And of those citations, some of those were vendors. How many were tourists? If tourists are never told no, and they know there's no consequences for their actions, when are they going to stop? And now you say you want to make, a setback for the chairs. Well, that still doesn't prevent anybody from setting up in front and having the same issue. people just don't like it if they get there and they can't just walk out easily and put down their things right in front of the water. Maybe there's just not enough waterfront spots for everybody and kicking out the vendors who are making their living. I've never seen them set up their chairs on wet sand. They always have it back. They make sure to not set it up on the wet sand. And then if you make a rule to the vendors that they can't set up their chairs there, that still doesn't stop the public from setting up right in front, and then you have the same walkway issue of not being able to walk across the beach. Doesn't stop the issue.
Tiffany, what section of the beach do you live? Is it Miramar or which section?
Eastern Lake.
Eastern Lake, okay. I just wonder, because some places are worse than others.
You know, and there's, you know, the Eastern Lake, and then there's a neighborhood access right by there. And, you know, and I'm not going to say everybody, you know, who comes there is doing horrible things. Of course not. A lot of people just go and have a nice time, but a lot of people also come to the beach and they like to haul their whole living room with them, and they have their tent and their kayaks and their this and their that, and it's taking up, you know, 100 feet of space around them, and nobody else can sit. I mean, there's other issues. It's not just as simple as that.
Yeah, it's not just the vendors, it's, you know, people leaving trash, and, you know, it's not, you know, just a vendor issue. And I thank you for bringing that out.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone on the back row? Anyone else on this side of the room at all? All right, I'll start on this side, front row. Ms. Bausch.
Lisa Bauschy, B-O-U-S-H-Y. She's got it memorized. I just want to mention a few things. I'll try not to be redundant since a lot of this has already been covered. I'm going to vary to trucks on the beach, and I've already expressed some concerns about it to some appropriate people, but I would really like to see you all encourage all of our people that have to be on the beach in trucks to stay as close to the wreck line as possible. Sometimes that's not possible. You know, the surf has created little cliffs or whatever, and we don't want to break it down the cliffs. So as close to the water as they can.
I'm sorry, Lisa, the what line?
Oh, the wreck line, the debris line, if you will.
Okay.
Now that assumes, you know, the beach is fairly flat.
Is this like emergency vehicles and cleanup vehicles?
Everything. And not because we don't want, obviously, we want our county sheriff's office to be able to get to people safely. We want our fire department to be, you know, any first responders. But there's emergencies, and then there's just sort of traversing the beach. And I unfortunately don't have pictures to show you right now, but after Hermine, we had a flawless beach. And within like 2 days, there are tire tracks literally from about 20 feet from the vegetation line for 50, 60 feet. And there's just no reason to have series after series of them, in my opinion. So I'd appreciate it if you all could maybe do some suggesting to everybody. The other thing is there are areas that have very few trash pickups that I'd like to see done from the top side. And clearly in the middle of the summer, we got tons of people, we got tons of trash. Okay, fine, maybe that time of year you just do it all from the beach and you have to avoid people, so that means you're going to ride higher up on the beach. It's unavoidable. But during this time of year, we have so few people, at least in some areas, that there's almost no need to have trucks on the beach in a lot of these areas. Okay, so I'll drop that. That's all I'm going to say about that. On tents, I like Mr. Bagby's idea of either no tents or setting them up farther back. The only thing I'd caution on causing people to set them back near the vegetation lines is the dunes. There are problems that a lot of people have become very respectful of the dunes. A lot of people still aren't. And all the comments you heard about people doing untoward things in the dunes do happen. But if nothing else, kids and people just run all over them, which isn't good for establishing vegetation. Thank you, Commissioner Meadows, for mentioning the reneging on the D8 clause would be a big deal. That would kind of destroy the credibility of the staff. I thank you. Well, one last thing is you might consider, instead of a 30-foot setback from the water for a walkway, maybe 15. maybe it doesn't really have to be 30 feet back. Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
Ms. Master. Anybody else on the front row? Next row. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Denise Kauf, and I sent some pictures to Cindy
Would
Meadows.
you spell your last name?
Yeah, it's Kauf as in Frank. And I live near the beach. I spend a lot of time at the beach near Ed Walleen, and I started the Turtle Watch this year. I've only been here about 2.5 years. And I love Walton County, and I think everyone does a great job here, but there's, I guess like the other woman was saying, you live here and maybe you see more of the true picture of what's going on. And my frustration is the trash. You're bringing all these people down here. I don't know if it's 1 million or if it's hundreds of thousands of people. And I'm out often, every week, several times a week, I'm out on the beach. I don't see the TDC out on the beach often. I know you empty the trash cans, but I see trash. I mean, a tremendous amount of trash, and you saw my pictures. I walk Blue Mountain to Grayton on Mondays. I walk Ed Walleen area on the bike trail to Stinky's. There's trash along the dune lakes. There's trash, debris around the pretty. I walked today. There's lovely wildflowers and butterflies and trash. I don't care if it's prisoners that come in. I see them occasionally. Working with volunteers, I'd be more than happy to get volunteers to help, but it's those water bottle tops are everywhere. They're washed up on the dune lakes, and there's cigarette butts, and I know it's small, but to me, it looks horrible for our area to see that trash. So that's why I'm here. I really didn't plan a great speech, but I was thinking about an adopt a 30A beach like you have adopt a highway. There are a lot of volunteers that do this already. They don't really want to be part of an organized group, but there's dog walkers, there's people like me that pick up all the time, and it's just unorganized, and you can't rely on people just picking up randomly the trash. I was in Gulf Shores this year, and I like what I heard someone say about the Easy Ups. They were, there's a sign that says they had to be so many feet back. They were about third row or so, and I liked that idea, by the way.
Good.
I think that's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate
Sure.
it. Let's see, what row is she? Second row? The next row? Anybody on that row? The next one? Yes, sir. Mr. Coon.
Good evening. Jimmy Coon, K-U-H-N. I live near Eastern Lake, and as this previous lady, I do turtle watch and walk the beach several times a week. I would like to suggest that the county develop 2 software applications. One would be an app that the public in the county can use on their smartphones or tablets to report issues they see on the beach. The second app would be where the public in the county can go online and see the reported issues and the status of the issue. Both apps could be used on any type of smartphone, tablet, or computer. The apps would record the type of issue, the date and time, the location, a picture if desired, and some comments. Given that the county has a GIS department and these apps are easily developed, they could be relatively inexpensive to create. The app could provide real-time data to the public, the TDC, and county personnel as to what's happening on the beach. It would allow the TDC and the county to focus on problem geographic areas and then problem times of the day. The county could update the status of the issues reported so the public will know what's happening with them. It would allow the county to measure and report the success of their enforcement efforts. As Mr. Brooks was talking about the statistics, it would give the public a greater sense of contributing to the effort to improve our beaches. And this would be an excellent tool for the Turtle Watch folks to be able to report issues that they see, and also for the new beach ambassadors. I have examples of these types of apps that I've developed for my personal use. I've shared these examples with the county GIS department, and I'd be glad to share or demo or discuss the apps with anyone at the TDC, the county, or the public. And as I said, the county has a GIS department, and my intention is not business related, but I just want to share what can be done with this type of technology. Thank you very much.
Anyone else on the next row, or the next? Is there anyone else that would like to speak at this time? Mr. Tuesday. Okay. I know, I was getting there. You know, we talked, where's Larry? We talked at one point about perhaps having people stationed at each public beach access, especially the regional ones, having TDC personnel that, okay, I'm coming down with all my stuff, and they say, oh, we're so glad you're here, thank you much. But let me just tell you, you can't have glass on the beach. And you know, we were talking about maybe having a boy and a girl, or a male and a female in the summer, whatever, to say, hey, I'm sorry, you can't, you know, and would that have to be, because I think, yeah, the dogs, they start early in the morning, or, you know, have them working shifts. Have we done any more about that? I know, I think it's a viable idea. I mean, I know we put up the signs, but you know, who reads the signs, really? I mean, you know, you're anxious to get down there, and the grandkids are screaming, so, you know, you just want to get on the beach. But if we had people stationed there that said, I'm sorry, Ms. Bouchy, but you can't take your dog. He doesn't have a permit, you know. But we're so glad to have you. You know, it could be a very positive, I think we need to especially look into maybe that kind of thing at our regional accesses. And they also could monitor the tent issue as well as the rental issue.
We are looking at using our beach ambassadors, which the new positions that are in the budget, yeah. So using them on that regional basis, and then also seeing if we can, you might be aware that a new ambassador program has kind of been created out of concerned citizens who want to help. And actually had a meeting yesterday with Friends of South Walton Turtles, and they are getting involved with that organization. And so I actually asked if they would help facilitate a meeting between the TDC and those folks, and how we can kind of get them and us to kind of work together, kind of as maybe volunteers with paid ambassadors, and maybe kind of create a team at these regional beach accesses. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now.
I'm very much in favor of volunteers. Most of the work I do, you know, it depends on volunteers, but yet I do know that when volunteers get hot, or it's raining, or it gets a little cold, or, you know, if you're not paid, you know, you really don't have to show up. You know, so maybe the mix of the two would be a very good way to go. You know, at least I say when you're paid to do a job, you're more likely to show up. And then, man, it's raining like cats and dogs today. I don't think I'm gonna go out there. You know, so I think maybe a mix of the two would be a good idea.
And we'll report back to you as we move forward with that.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I guess I was a little confused coming into the meeting, because I thought it was going to be more of a discussion on a comprehensive beach plan, like we're going to add more accesses, we're going to, you know, increase the number of people, try to get more people to go to the state parks, you know, more, and I know we have some issues, and so I want a more comprehensive plan of what are we going to do to address these issues. We know we have too many people for too few beaches, so we're doing everything we can to buy regional places, and I think that's good, but there's other things that we can do in a more comprehensive way of tackling some of this.
Okay.
So
You know,
I think we're on the right track, and I appreciate Mr. Tusa and his effort, but we're, you know, we've got a lot of challenges. So
we do, and something we didn't talk about here this evening, but it also is weddings and special events on the beach, and that is something that Brian and I are working on, and we'll also be including that when we come back and talk to you.
We do. And, you know, I think we've seen where Topsail has been such an overwhelming success. If we could get the state interested in opening up the other state parks along Walton County, make money for them. I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. It makes money for the state parks. It gives, you know, people a chance to drive up and, you know, and go to the beach and relieve some of the pressure, you know,
Yes, ma'am.
And with us paying the bill, to me, it's, so if we could really get as many of, the state parks that are left that could join into, I know you're working on it, Brian, but, I mean, that's another avenue we need to. Ms. Boucher, yes, ma'am.
Do we have final numbers on Topsail?
We got those this week, so I need to take a look at those and send those out. I know you had asked for them, so I haven't even looked at them myself, to be honest with you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Just maybe a last. Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Maybe just one last comment about like you said, the number of people that are coming here and the number of people that amount of beach that we have. Actually, we only have 8 acres of public beach in the entire stretch. 8 acres. So, and 50% of that is allowed for the vendors. So that's 4 acres of that. So we've got 4 acres left of beach for 3.5 million people. I think that we need to look at it from a planning viewpoint as well. Are we going to approve, a 20-story high-rise that's going to bring another 1,000 units when we don't have any beach? Are we going to approve, more density when we're already out of beach? So I think when you
Don't we have a height limit? A height limit?
excuse me, I'm talking. Do you mind?
Go right ahead.
Okay. No, there are places where you can still build high rises. And so I think that's one of the things that you can do is when we look at some of these projects that are over the top density wise, and there's not enough road and there's not enough drainage, there's also not enough beach. So if we keep doing that, yeah, we're going to have this problem forever, and we will never solve it.
We're coming a long way in solving problems, though. We've come a long way. Even, I've heard Brian say that even the vendor situation is somewhat better. So I have hope that we're going to be moving forward. I'm not doom and gloom, so I think we're going to make some progress.
Sir, I'll give you 1 minute.
Just one quick comment.
She needs to record you. You've got to come up here and state your name again.
Eric Johnson, Miramar Beach Service. You were discussing your ambassador program, and I think you're overlooking the guys that are on the beach every day. Why not invite the vendors into this ambassador program? That's all.
If they'll play nice, that's what we want.
They do play nice.
I see no other people wanting to speak, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.